County, the sheriff warns beach erosion threatens the structural integrity of several beachside condominium buildings. It was 6 weeks ago that Hurricane Ian devastated Florida's southwest coast. A day later, it's still not clear the control of the Congress. Republicans say they are confident of gaining the majority in the House of Representatives, but they're still 11 seats short of that, as the votes have yet to be finalized in 44 House districts. Control of the Senate may not be decided for nearly a month. December 6th is the date for a runoff election in the Georgia Senate race. Votes are still being tabulated in Alaska, Nevada, and in Arizona, where GOP candidate for Governor Kari Lake says the delay is unacceptable.
On day one, we're going to start working to reform our elections so that all voters can feel confident that we have honest elections.
Lake is trailing Democrat Katie Hobbs slightly, but says she's 100% confident of victory. President Biden says the lack of a red wave in the midterm elections is a validation of his efforts.
I'm confident these policies are working and that we're on the right path, and we need to stick with them.
The president says he plans to meet with congressional leaders from both sides of the aisle, trying to find unity. He also says he'll make a decision about running for re-election sometime in the new year. Texas has executed convicted killer Tracy Beatty. He was given a lethal injection for the brutal murder of his own mother in 2004. In his final statement, Beatty told his wife, whom he married while on death row, he'd see her on the other side. America is listening to Fox News.
Reggae in Paradise. Let's vibe out to some of the hottest Irie vibes on all your playlists. Join the vibes on November 19th at Paseo Stadium. It's on a Saturday, and we have an amazing lineup of artists. Mix Plate, Bubba B, Fantasia, The John Denk Show,
Still running away.
Kimmy A. Minor, Lickle Jordy, High Water, and Rebel Sojas. Get your tickets now at guamtime.net. What are you waiting for? Presenting sponsors, big thanks to Riga Royal, IT&E, White Claw, GVB, Gasolina, Linda's Diner, and Empire Media and Entertainment. Saturday, November 19th, Reggae in Paradise. We'll see you there.
Lawyers for Rhodes wrapped up their case with testimony from a man described as the Oath Keepers operations leader for January 6th. Michael Green told the jury he came to Washington to oversee security services for prominent right-wing figures, but denied there was ever even an implicit plan to attack the Capitol. Rhodes never entered the building and testified earlier that he thought it was a stupid thing for his fellow Oath Keepers to do, but prosecutors countered with messages from Rhodes urging supporters to fight to keep President Trump in power. Rhodes and 4 other Oath Keepers face up to 20 years in prison if convicted of seditious conspiracy. Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
David Dupont, the man already in custody in last month's attack on House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband, has been indicted on federal charges of assault and federal kidnapping. A Maryland couple has been sentenced to prison for trying to sell some of the country's military secrets.
Jonathan and Diana Tebby pleaded guilty to conspiracy to communicate restricted data related to the design of nuclear-powered warships. Jonathan Tebby was working as a nuclear engineer for the Department of the Navy when he got that data. Prosecutors said he was selling it to someone he thought was from a foreign government, but was actually an undercover FBI agent. On Wednesday, a judge sentenced him to more than 19 years in prison. His wife got more than 21 years. The judge said it appeared Diana Tebby was the brains of the operation. Prosecutors said she acted as a lookout while her husband delivered that material. Jill Nato, Fox News.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin will not attend the Group of 20 summit meeting in Indonesia next week, according to an Indonesian government official. This avoids a possible confrontation with the United States and its allies over the war in Ukraine, now in its 8th month. The Kremlin reportedly planning to pull out of Kherson, but military analysts warn it could be an ambush. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Kona Brewing Company, Wenti Vineyards, and First Hawaiian Bank presents internationally renowned slack key master, Ledward Ka'apana. Ledward Ka'apana, founding member of the legendary Hawaiian music group Hui Ohana, joined Grammy-nominated and multiple Nahoku Hanohano Award winner Ledward Ka'apana for 2 magical nights.
Saturday, November 12th, the Tsubaki Tower, doors open at 6 p.m. And Sunday, November 13th, the Hotel Nico Guam, doors open at 5 p.m. Tickets are available at Ambrose and at the door. $40 in advance and $50 at the door.
Slack Key Master Ledward Ka'apana, live on Guam, Saturday, November 12th and Sunday, November 13th.
Presented by Kona Brewing Company, Wenti Vineyards, and First Hawaiian Bank. Special thanks to Choice Broadcasting, The Point, Star 101, and Boss 104.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I start the show that way every day, and I usually give a little précis as to what the show is about, but today's a special day. Today is November 10, as you were 2022, causing a certain number of us to reflect back to November 10, 1775, the day that the United States Marine Corps was founded at a place called Tun Tavern. So in honor of that particular auspicious occasion, we're going to deviate a little bit. I'm going to go to the side camera. I'm going to show you that I'm properly attired as Jose plays the Marine Corps hymn. Marines know that, unlike other services, when the Marine Corps hymn plays, Marines stand at attention. So that's what I'll be doing. I'll be standing at attention at the side camera. Go ahead, Jose. So that's the way, a really great way to start a show on the 10th of November. And of course, it's fully in keeping with the tenor of this show, which is a constitutionally oriented show that celebrates individual freedom, liberty, individual rights, small government, conservatism, patriotism, all of these values that we all hold so dear. So if that's where your head is at, you're certainly in the right place. If it isn't, you are really in the right place. Okay, so proceeding on in our usual order of things, I go to Demi Ikatni. And I guess that today's editorial perhaps indicates that the Daily News listens to Tall Tales, because yesterday I was pretty hard on them because they missed the real news in the election. 5 newcomers were elected to the Guam legislature, and a couple of them were really new. I mean, people that just came out of nowhere. I can't say that I was excited about any of the individual newcomers, but I think it's always good when challengers beat incumbents. We need to bring new blood into the legislature. the legislature tends to become very inbred, where, a small number of people work at the legislature, serve as senators, flip back and forth the administration, etc. We need folks from outside to come in. So yesterday, the Daily News highlighted, well, you're going to see some familiar faces in the legislature. Today, the headline of their editorial is, Our View, Welcome to the Political Newcomers in the 37th Guam Legislature. The 2022 general election brought drama and excitement and some new faces to the legislature. When the 37th Guam Legislature convenes in January, new faces and new perspectives will join established political leaders. They will bring fresh energy and vision as they craft the laws that will govern our community. The second highest vote getter among senatorial candidates was political newcomer Democrat Darrell Christopher Barnett. Barnett, also known as Chris Malfunction, has done both satire news and told the Rotary Club last month that he's looking forward to a career in public service. Yeah, I don't like the sound of that, If you're getting paid for it, it ain't service. It's a job. Maybe the guys on the CCU can claim public service, but not guys in the legislature.
Maybe he's turning into salary.
Maybe, just like Palacios promised to do one time. All right, here's a quote. I felt like I was able to do comedy because I was able to really kind of look at the issues and dissect what I felt were the most important things for the people to understand, and I try to apply that same principle when I transitioned into news reporting, he said at the time. His campaign focused on creating a safer Guam and building a grassroots movement. Another colorful newcomer is Democrat Dwayne, Mr. Goodman, San Nicolas, a Hoggett business owner who campaigned to, quote, build a happier Guam. San Nicolas, who has worked in law enforcement, the military, and as Santa Claus, has very serious goals of eliminating poverty and hunger, working for equality and creating jobs. I wonder if he could repeal the law of gravity while he's at it so that, if you slip, you're not going to fall.
He only employs elves.
Democrat Roy Kinata campaigned on his youthfulness and his status as a regular citizen. Kinata's campaign literature pointed out he was the youngest candidate running for senator and said voters typically choose the same candidates, the same names, the same faces, the same people they've been complaining about. He billed himself as hashtag one of us.
Not Onofus?
Oni office.
Office.
Yeah. Also elected Tuesday were Democrat William Parkinson, son of longtime Senator and former Speaker Don Parkinson, and a Republican attorney, Thomas Fisher. Both said they ran for office because they felt the need to serve the community. With a third of the 37th legislature made up of political newcomers, we hold high hopes that their energy and commitment will serve us well over the next 2 years. We congratulate the incoming senators and look forward to seeing them put their plans in action.
You know what? Just a little bit of clarity here. Not to rain on the parade. Congratulations to all these newcomers. I look at elected Senator-elect San Nicolas as one of the few who is actually one of us. And I look at Kanata as maybe somebody who is kind of one of us because he comes from a senator's office. So you know what I mean? It's just a little.
And then he's not one of us.
He's not really one of us.
He's a swamp creature.
Parkinson is the son of a politician and ran his dad's name. Barnett, we know who he is. He's not a politician, but he's in the public in the public eye. So just a little clarity.
Yeah, very good, Jose. Okay, let's take a look at the card. Can I borrow your card, Jose? I somehow forgot to bring mine along. No, I can't borrow it.
I didn't get one in the mail today.
Oh, that's probably...
We're both out of luck.
Yeah, okay. Well, let me see here what I can do. I've got the 37th Guam well, of course, I've got Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. And, strange. I wonder what else I forgot. Yeah, the 37th Guam Legislature versus Babies. I've got Estavis versus Brennan. I've got the Civil Service, as you were. I've got Democrat Party versus Democrats. And then some holdovers from yesterday. Klaus Schwab versus the West. And Troy versus GMH. And I probably ought to pick up Troy versus GMH, yeah. Okay, and then I didn't finish with my analysis of the candidates yesterday, so that's where I'll start. I don't think I need to talk too much about Paul Zerzan and systemic racism today. I think everybody's got that pretty well down. We got an early bird here in the green room. It would be none other than our Carl, who wants to ask a quick question about Roy Kanata. You better be quick, Carl.
Hey, Bob. Yes, good afternoon. Yeah, I've got a quick question about Roy. You commented, about his big splashy signs everywhere and using the old, decades-old rule book. And I tended to agree. Anyone can throw a lot of money at something and maybe get some results. But I much preferred your style of doing, the guerrilla campaigning. But what is your take on the fact that he actually got in? That was kind of surprising to me. I thought he was gonna miss. What do you attribute his succeeding to?
Well, I think that it's the lackluster campaign that the vast majority of candidates ran. I haven't gotten all the way down to the bottom of the list yet, but you take somebody like... where was his name here? Vince Bora has run, 3 times now? 3 times, and I wouldn't know Vince Bora if he walked in here and punched me in the nose. And that was the case with so many other candidates, just completely lackluster campaigns. And, if you want to be successful, it's radio and TV, and nowadays social media. Knowing how to wave, knowing when to wave, and knowing where to wave helps. But I had thought that signs had outlived their usefulness long ago. But if that's the only thing you're seeing out there, and every time you drive down the road, you see this 20 by 20 foot sign of Roy Kanata, and that's the only game in town, I guess that's the reason he won, because he just certainly doesn't have anything going for him. Working for a senator, was he a hall monitor at Southern High or something like that?
There was a expertly placed hamburger placed on his sign.
Yeah,
that's what helped him.
A little sabotage of his sign got him some earned media. So that would be the best that I could come up with, Carl.
Okay, I was just wondering if the old rule book is still in play somewhat. But yeah, I guess you're right. It's just that the other candidates were making very little effort to be visible, and he threw his money out to get at least his face and his name out there.
Yeah.
But I much prefer your style, Bob, guerrilla campaigning. If I was, going to do anything, I'd pay money to sit down and consult with you, because you've walked your talk, and much preferred. All right. Anyway, thank you for giving your opinion on that. I was just curious.
All right, Carl. So last item on the list here was number 18, Sarah Thomas Nedidok, who has run before, who has been part of the political establishment for a long, long time, in and out of the legislature, the administration, so on. Jonathan Savaris was one of the Blacklist 10, which should have been a real selling point for him if he had sold it. But, you know, I see the most powerful force here for the vast majority of candidates is inertia. You know, they start to kind of move along, and no matter what the issues are, what's going, I didn't see anybody jump on the insular cases as an issue. I didn't even heard anybody mutter the words Jones Act. So if it weren't for give the land back to the original landowners, there wouldn't be anything to talk about for most of the candidates.
It was pretty much, hey, I'm running for office, and then crickets.
Yeah. I'm a candidate for office. I'm from South Malolo, and I hope you can vote for me. I'm really a nice person, and on and on.
There were a few candidates, and you're getting down to the list, but there were a few candidates that did have a platform and an outline of what they're running on. Sarah Benedog had a full page ad a couple of times.
Yeah.
But maybe a little more concise.
Well, you're not going to get elected on a platform. You're going to get elected on a message.
There you go.
And a message is the 2, 3, or 4 things that you want people to know about what you're going to do for them as a senator. And you need to be able to, whatever the subject is, bring it back to your message and harp on your message so that people identify that message with you. Okay, next on the list, Jose Pido Titlahi. And I think I heard somebody on Ray's show say the rattling of the skeletons in Jose Pido's Titlahi got so loud that it drowned out his campaign. It's too much bad press. So Pido got 10,880 votes to finish 20th. Fred Berdaya was right behind him with 10,866. You know, I should have been a pro Fred Berdaya guy myself. You know, Fred's a Marine. And Fred's MOS was corrections in the Marine Corps. So he should have been, you know, really bring a lot to the table. But instead of doing that, he just campaigned like a Democrat. And that won't do it. Vince Bora, I think if we gave a prize for a stealth campaign, it would be Vince Bora. He ran in such a manner that no one really knew that he was running. And we've got Michelle Hope Titano at 10,151 votes. I think this is Michelle's third time around. And I think she's probably been right about the same place every time. I warned Sam Mabini Young with about 10 days out from the election that Sam Mabini Young, Dr. Sam Mabini Young, could not get elected just on being Dr. Sam Mabini Young with a doctor's degree in workforce development. Had she been the precursor of a part-time legislature, I think she would have had a really good chance. Because if you make your campaign about a part-time legislature, you're able to harness all of the negative emotions that people have for the legislature, the fraud, waste, abuse, waste of time, silliness, etc. And you could actually offer something that is going to be much better. And she had it, you know, if she had 10 elements in her campaign commercial, part-time legislature was number 9, when it should have been 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Angela Santos attempted to capitalize on the fact that she was the brother of Angel Santos. I got her all the way up to number 25. Number 26, a big disappointment for me, Ken Leon Guerrero. Ken is out there really busting his ass, trying to uncover fraud, waste, and abuse, expose people that need to be exposed. certainly the kind of person that we need to see in public life. But I mentioned earlier that successful candidates engage in negative campaigning. They tell you what's wrong with the opposition, but they also give you a picture of what life is going to be like if they are in the legislature. Ken was never able to do that.
Maybe my little spin on it is maybe the voters thought he'd be better as the thumb of the eye as a private citizen.
Yeah, maybe we're better off keeping him right where he's at. Yeah,
He's doing a fine job.
and then Sandra Seau, who was a pretty avid tailgater, right? Yeah, and Bistra Mendiola, who in the beginning, came across like kind of a fresh, new, articulate voice, a little bit exotic, having been born in communist Bulgaria, someone who could really kind of set the record straight on this drift to the left here that we're experiencing. But Bistra couldn't get herself right on abortion, and I don't think that helped her much. She finished 28th. David Chrysostomo. Who is David Chrysostomo, Jose?
He got his sign stolen. That's all I know.
Yeah. And Ian Catling, same thing. Who are these guys?
I didn't even know he was running.
Yeah. And then for the Attorney General, Doug finished with 14,952 votes. Levin finished with 14,875 votes. Let's see, that's 77 votes apart. And then there was a write-in who got 2,495 votes. So your vanity, I hope your vanity paid off for you there, Pete Santos. 2,495 people wrote your name in the ballot. My analysis is that almost all of those came from the votes that would have gone to Doug Moylan. Doug still has a shot at losing because we still got to count the absentee ballots. I don't know how many there are. I don't know how they tend to go. I would be much happier if Doug had gotten 2,495 votes and you had stayed on the sidelines criticizing Levin Camacho, which was a place where you were really valuable. You turned yourself from a really valuable participant to a gigantic monkey wrench that got thrown in Doug Moylan's machinery. Not good. The Education Policy Board. It's interesting that the president of GCC is also a board member. And I know that people are out there mumbling, oh, isn't that a conflict of interest? Well, I suppose it could be if there's a contest of resources between GCC and the Department of Education. But I don't think it is, here's the word for today, ipso facto a conflict of interest. Just on the mere fact that she's there. You'd have to examine it on an issue-by-issue basis. We've got Peter Alexis Atta, who's been on and off the board for a long, long time. Angel Sablon. Let's hope that he can do the same thing for the Education Policy Board that he's done for the Mayor's Council. Angel Sablon has been a perpetual candidate for the legislature. This is the first election I think he's won. Dr. Ron McNinch, of course, is a fixture on the Education Policy Board. Maria Gutierrez goes all the way back to the time when I was Director of Education. Lourdes Benavente, Elaine Uzoa, Joseph Santos, Renata Camacho. Consolidated Commission on Utilities. The guys won that I was hoping would win. Simon finished tops, 16,259 votes. Number 2 was Mike Limtiaco, 13,081 votes. Francis Santos, 11,854. Well, Francis was a little bit off the power curve, wasn't he? Maybe that's his stint at the Department of Education that dragged him down. Melvin Duenas, who called here a couple of times, right? But then before he had his chance to go on the air, he had cold feet. Nonito Blas, who's got a high-powered set of credentials, and Ricardo Ompenko, who was the general manager of the Power Authority back in the bad old days, back in the load-shedding blues days. So that's our rundown on the people that were successful. And now let's go to the next item on the card. This is the 37th Guam Legislature. And let's take a short break before we go back to that item on the card.
Looking for a boost in leadership? Live to Lead is back. Guam's #1 leadership event is coming November 29th at the Hyatt Regency Guam. It's the 8th annual global simulcast with 5 world-class speakers led by John C. Maxwell. We'll have leadership activities at the table, and you'll get a plan to jumpstart 2023. It's an exciting and energizing day to reset and recharge. Get all the details at livetoleadguam.com. That's live, the number 2, leadguam.com. Live2leadguam.com. Live to Lead is brought to you by Atkins Kroll, the Guam Chamber of Commerce, Guam Contractors Association, the Guam Daily Post, and 93.3 FM, The Point. Get the details and the lowest possible ticket prices right now at livetoleadguam.com. I'm Jerry Roberts, and I approve this message.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, so this is an article that ran in the Daily News today. 37th Guam Legislature, path on abortion unclear. We know that because of the Dobbs decision, the matter of whether or not abortion can be criminalized is left up to state legislatures, or in our case, a territorial legislature. So our legislature has the ability to say absolutely no abortions whatsoever, or you could have an abortion right up to the moment of birth. We have Public Law 20-124 on the books, Bell's Law, that our esteemed Attorney General, let's hope he's our esteemed ex-Attorney General, says is void ab initio because it was unconstitutional at the time it was enacted. I wrote a pretty good piece for the Pacific Island Times capitalizing on not what Levin did, but what he didn't do. He found cases that said void ab initio, and he stopped looking. If you read my article, you'll see that you put one phrase in the search box on Google, and the first hit you get will be an ancient law review article from the University of Indiana that states what it refers to as the Indiana rule, that even a statute that's void ab initio because unconstitutional when enacted is resurrected if the offending court reverses itself on the constitutionality aspect, which is exactly what happened here with Dobbs. So there's some authority that that statute actually is now the law of the island. Levin, of course, would rather come up with one of his BS opinions and say, no, it's not, and let it go at that. If he were acting as an attorney general ordinarily acts, which is to uphold and defend the statutes of his jurisdiction, he would make a motion to dissolve the injunction. If the court grants the injunction, Bell's Law is resurrected. If the court denies the injunction, Levin's hands are clean. We can't say, well, Levin just enacted his own personal bias instead of moving forward as Attorney General. I have a suspicion that if Doug Moylan becomes our Attorney General, he will move to dissolve that injunction and put 20-134 back on the books. If that doesn't happen, then a senator with a sharp pencil could easily come up with a bill to reenact Public Law 20-134 and put that law back on the books. And of course, our heartbeat bill languishes in the legislature because even the pro-aborts don't have the guts to put it on the agenda, bring it to the floor, and vote it down. They're afraid of it, and they're afraid of you pro-aborts out there, so don't give up. And we've still got a lot of work to do. We've still got a lot of babies to save. So let me plunge into this article here. With the power to regulate abortions kicked back to state and territorial legislatures this year, a candidate's position for or against the procedure was one of many considerations voters had to make as they chose their top 15 senatorial picks. For some, it was a decisive factor. Based on previous statements from incoming senators, it's unclear whether any measure to ban the procedure could win the 8 votes needed to pass the 37th Guam legislature or the 10 votes needed to overcome a veto from Governor Lilian Guerrero. The odds of a bill enshrining the right to the procedure becoming law aren't great either. Of the senators who made the cut in the unofficial 2022 general election results, 7 oppose abortion to varying degrees. 4 support the procedure outright. 2 have called for referendums, and 2 have unclear positions. The group Famila'an Rights, which has been advocating pro-abortion leaders this election, plans to continue to engage with the upcoming lawmakers and the public, said Kiana Yabut, Deputy Director and Chief Relations Officer. With only 4 of the newly elected senators being pro-choice, we at Famila'an Rights understand that we must fight harder, be louder, and advocate more and more in order to ensure that our right to choice is protected.
The PDN had it right the first time. Pro-abortion leaders.
Yeah.
Not pro-choice.
Not pro-choice. Let's quit beating around the bush. Either you're for abortion or you're against abortion. Let's not use euphemisms. Naturally, we are all disappointed that more pro-choice leaders were not elected, but we are optimistic for the future of reproductive health care in our island. And we look forward to working with our leaders to ensure that our right to choose lays with us and not in the government. Classic talking points. Nothing new here. Catholic blogger Tim Rohr, who equated abortion to killing babies, said regardless of the outcome in the legislative race, a local abortion ban won't find its legs because there's nobody that's really willing to fight for it.
Can I make a clarification here? And I reached out to Tim. This thing that PDN does with euphemisms. Now, they got the pro-abort leaders correct, but we know Tim Rohr, and he would never equate abortion to killing babies. He would say abortion is killing babies, and that's a really important fact to point out.
Exactly. It's not the same thing as killing babies.
It is.
It is killing babies. Yeah. According to Rohr, that's evidenced by the lack of effort by the sponsors of Bill 291, which would ban abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected, to pass the measure. He described himself as a Republican, but he said that no candidate affiliated with the party had made abortion a central part of their platform this year, despite saying they were anti-abortion. And, of course, we can all sit back and hypothesize, trying to put ourselves in the heads of the politicians, and I suspect a lot of politicians are saying, oh, it's a web issue. If I come out 100% in favor of it, I'll pick up all the pro-aborts, but I'll lose all of I'll pick up all the anti-aborts. I'll lose a lot of the pro-aborts and maybe some of the on the fence, and I can't win that way. So better that I campaign on it, but not make it the thrust of my campaign. My sense, I have 2 things to say about that. One, I think it's wrong. I think that a strong anti-abortion platform would be a winner, just like I think a strong part-time legislature platform would be a winner. And then second, if you want to run for the legislature, but you're not running because of what you think is really important, do you really want to run for the legislature? Is it worth it? Is that what it's about? In other words, does being a senator mean more than being committed to something that you think is a really important cause? Candidates will basically do whatever they need to get elected because they know that the majority of Guam isn't going to vote on the abortion issue, Rohr said. Well, I wonder. We've never really had the chance to find out, have we?
Well, we did have one in 1990.
Yeah. Yeah, and everybody that voted for Bell's Law had successful careers. Okay, then we've got the anti-abort, starting out with Democrat Amanda Shelton, who hasn't responded to any questions, but was a co-sponsor of Bill 291, the Heartbeat Act. Democrat Joe St. Augustine said, I'm anti-abortion, but I cannot support any measure that doesn't allow for exceptions for victims of rape or incest or deemed medically necessary to save a life. That's what Joe St. Augustine said. So let's stop and parse that one a little bit. Now, abortion is abortion is abortion. Killing a baby is killing a baby is killing a baby. Killing a baby because you subscribe to this, it's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives via Anita Williams. Or if you say, I'm really 100% against anti-abortion, however, to make a person who was raped carry the fruit of that rape to term, it's not fair. And once again, whether it's fair or not fair depends on where you start. And to me, the only place to start is with a helpless, innocent life that has absolutely no control over what happens to him or her. I should have said them, right?
You can put two pictures of a sonogram of two fetuses, unborn babies up there, and say one of these was conceived in rape. Can you tell me which one?
Yeah.
And nobody will be able to.
You cannot do that. No, I mean, you cannot. So to me, it's always wrong to take the life of a helpless, innocent human, regardless of the conception of that innocent. Do I feel bad for any woman who's been raped? Absolutely. You know, up until maybe 50 years ago, rape was a capital crime. In some states, you could suffer the death penalty for rape. Supreme Court did away with that. I'm not so sure that was a good idea. But to commit the unborn baby to the death penalty because he wasn't careful enough in choosing his parents.
So they just transferred the capital crime to the baby. Exactly.
That's what the pro-aborts want to do, yeah. And then the same thing with incest. Incest, once again, is abhorrent, but we know that the genetic defects arising from incest don't occur from a single. You got to have 3 or 4 generations before you get to hemophilia or something like that.
Just as England.
Yeah, right. So this puts a senator perhaps on the horns of a dilemma that I can understand. So let's say that there are 7 people in the legislature who say, I will not vote for anything that curbs a woman's right to choose. She should have the right to choose and control of her own body right up until 2 seconds before birth. And let's say we have 7 others that say abortion is always wrong. It's always wrong to take the life of a helpless, innocent human. And then the eighth man, Joe San Augustine. And, Joe's standing up in front of the legislature, and there's this tug of war going on. There are 7 people pulling on each of his arms, just about to tear him in half, right? And they're both saying, Joe, you got to go our way. If you got to go our way. So what do you do if you're the 7 who say abortion is always wrong? And Joe says, I'll go with you guys, but we got to do a floor amendment and take out rape and incest, or I ain't voting for it. What's the correct call there?
That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I've gone back and forth on that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I don't know if you probably have this same perception also. The instances of rape and incest, as far as abortions go, is extremely low.
True.
It is not the issue to hang on in the sense of why we need abortion. Because the majority of abortions, the vast majority of abortions, are out of convenience.
And according to Tim, married people. not
pregnant teenagers.
No, not pregnant teenagers. Yeah. So I think what that one comes down to is a contest between a pragmatic approach or idealistic purism. But I'd really be interested to see how some of our tailgaters feel about that. I think maybe we'll raise that question again on Monday, give people a little chance to think about it. But I'd be interested in hearing your take on it today out there, tailgaters. Post something on Facebook. Give us a call, whatever. Okay, going back to, that was Joe San Augustine. And we got Frank Blas, who said that he's opposed to any form of abortion. But, now here's a little rhetorical cue for you. If you want to say that you're in favor of something, but that there are qualifications to your support, take the word "but," wrap it up really tight, and throw it in the garbage, because no one is going to pay any attention to what you say, but what comes after the word "but." I gave a little chautauqua at the university about this one time, about the military buildup. And I said, if you're in favor of the military buildup, then you can say this: I'm really in favor of the military buildup, and I'm urging our government officials to work with the military in such a way that it benefits the civilian community as much as possible. That's one way to do it. Second way to do it: I'm really in favor of the military buildup, but I'm urging it's just not the same. So when you put "but" in there, this is what you said, Frank Blas Jr. I have to be cognizant of the necessary to work with different points of view, for lack of a better term, a compromise, so that we can save the lives of more innocent children from being senselessly killed. Now, compromise on what? So it doesn't come out that Frank Blas is opposed to abortion. Frank Blas is in favor of compromise.
This is going to be harsh, Frank Blas Jr., but that compromise you're hanging your argument on, are only the children going to be affected by that compromise?
That's right.
Not you.
Not you, yeah. Yeah, so once again, very poor delivery. Perhaps his head is in the right place, but his mouth certainly isn't. Then we got Chris Duenas. I'm not in favor of legal abortion, and that he would vote for a bill to ban the procedure. That's the right answer. Tello Taitigui. I will always choose life, though she supports access to affordable medical and mental health support for women. Well, what kind of mental, like abortion services, chemical abortion.
To me, this tells me she loves fish, specifically red herring.
Yeah. Joanne Brown, as has said, as a pro-life supporter, I'm in favor of tightening up the abortion laws. Jesse Luan has said he would vote for banning abortion as long as it includes exceptions for rape, incest, and if the mother's life is in danger. All right, let's take a short break and we'll come back to this.
Reggae in Paradise. Let's vibe out to some of the hottest Irie vibes on all your playlists. Join the vibes on November 19th at Paseo Stadium. It's on a Saturday and we have an amazing lineup of artists. Mix Plate, Bubba B, Fantasia, The John Dank Show,
Still running away.
Kimmy A. Minor, Lico Jordy, High Water, and Rebel Sojas. Get your tickets now at guamtime.net. What are you waiting for? Presenting sponsors, big thanks to Riga Royal, IT&E, White Claw, GVB, Gasolina, Linda's Diner, and Empire Media and Entertainment. Saturday, November 19th, Reggae in Paradise. We'll see you there.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to nectac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
All right, so then we pick up with Roy Kanata. Roy Kanata, a Democrat newcomer, has said, I will be sure to protect a woman's right to choose. Democrat newcomer William Parkinson has said he would support a bill to protect abortion as a right, although he is a devout Catholic. How can you be a devout Catholic and support a bill to protect abortion? I don't see how that works.
I helped set up these concentration camps for Germany, although I'm a practicing Jew.
Exactly. Democrat newcomer Dwayne St. Nicholas has said we're all for life, but we must leave the decision to every woman to decide for herself, and that he would vote against any measure restricting the right to choose. Any measure. Democrat Sabina Paris has said she would support legislation to make abortion access, a right. A right. Abortion is a moral choice that should be left to the individual woman to make. A moral choice.
Okay, now don't take this wrong, people, but Sabina Paris is correct in that a moral choice should be left to the individual to make. However, the consequences of making a moral choice that affects another individual's rights is what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Because everybody has the right, whether or not to steal, to murder, to be a thief. Those are all moral choices that we make every single day.
True enough. And then we got Democrat Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes has said the issue is too complex to answer with a yes or no. Too complex. Too complex for you, Tina. And that she would support a bill to put the question to a referendum before voters.
But we voted you in.
Yeah, well, if it's too complex for someone who's a full-time professional politician, how about the hoi polloi out there in voter land? Is it going to be too complex for them? Republican newcomer Thomas Fisher has said he would want the matter to be put to a referendum because I'm tired of this issue being decided by men.
Somebody better not show him the Constitution.
No. And somebody better make sure that when the roll is called, they leave his name off at the legislature when we're voting. Yeah, because, you know, he's a man, and we got too many things that are just decided by men. So he should not stand up and be counted. He should sit down and not be counted.
That's very perplexing reason for not voting for anything.
Democrat Speaker Therese Tetlahi has said the public needs to weigh in on any abortion proposal. I will continue to exert my leadership in ensuring that every abortion measure that comes in front of my committee is fully vetted by the people of Guam. She needs to take that word vetted out of her vocabulary. I think that's what you maybe do with an appointee to an important office. Democrat newcomer Christopher Barnett hasn't responded to the newspaper questions on abortions, meaning he's probably a pro-abort. Okay, we got just a couple of seconds here going up to the halftime show. Let me see who's on Facebook here on this beautiful 10th day of November. Colin Clark is there, Lonnie Salas, Margaret Stockyu, Colin Clark, who tells us that his MOS was 1341, engineer equipment mechanic, when he was in the crotch. And let's see, we've got Brendan Fausto and Colin Clark, Holly Marine here shouting out USMC. Lonnie Salas is here. Tim Zedicher gives us a Semper Fi. And let's see, Jose Martinez chimed in with what drama and excitement. It was a sleepy season. Prudencio Mano says Halls of Montezuma. That was when the Marine Corps fought in the Mexican-American War at the Battle of, Montezuma, at the Battle of Chapultepec. The shores of Tripoli, of course, were against the Tripolitan Corsairs. The shores of North Africa, a Marine named Presley O'Banion was one of the first to raise the American flag over foreign soil when he and Captain William B. Eaton took on the Corsairs and beat them at the Battle of, I think it was Derna. And David Dinsman talks about the shores of Tripoli. Colin says, my son Nick, also a Marine, 5 years guarded President Trump, Commandant of the Marine Corps, and I can brag out loud now, he's moved on. So he was part of Marine barracks apparently in D.C., guard for the Commandant, guard for the President. And David Dinsman thought that was pretty good. And then let's see, did Bob say a slip? Borja? What was that?
B-O-R-E.
Oh, Borja. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's break for the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Landfall imminent. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. 75-mile-an-hour wind gusts battering the southeast Florida coastline as Hurricane Nicole is expected to make landfall shortly. The winds have been pushing the waves onshore, leading to serious beach erosion. Volusia County Sheriff Mike Chitwood says making some beachside buildings structurally unstable.
Hurricane Ian did a number on the infrastructure here. You got 12 properties in the shores that are in danger of collapsing. We have 22 up the street in Wilbur by the Sea. This is really bad, and that's why we have a curfew and a mandatory evacuation.
The storm is forecast to track across the state into the Gulf of Mexico and then make a second landfall in Florida's Big Bend area. Governor Ron DeSantis has declared a state of emergency in nearly 36 counties. All of the votes have yet to be counted, and control of the Congress is still undecided. But President Biden took a bit of a post-election victory lap at the White House on Wednesday.
President Biden's pre-election optimism actually proved to be warranted.
The fact that the Democratic Party outperformed anything anyone expected and did better than any off-year presidency since John Kennedy is one that gives everybody like, whew, sigh of relief.
So now it is, as you know, on to prepping for the general election in 2024. By the way, the president intends to announce if he'll run for re-election sometime next year.
Fox's Kevin Corke. Which party runs the Senate may not be decided until the runoff election next month in Georgia. Republican Senate candidate Herschel Walker telling Fox's Hannity.
Right now, we're in a tiebreaker. And that's why I said I'm not giving this seat up, because right now the Georgia people are hurting because of this inflation. The Georgia people are hurting because of crime on the street.
Democrat incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock says he is confident that Georgians ultimately will make the right choice. America is listening to Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tenactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show. Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle. Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits. Morning mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all three. 671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Echoes of 1968. The man who was wounded in the fatal shooting of Senator Robert Kennedy has died.
Paul Schrade was a labor union leader who was hurt during the assassination of Senator Robert Kennedy in 1968. Sirhan was tackled, arrested, and convicted of the killing. But Schrade was convinced Sirhan wasn't the killer and spent years looking into the case. Los Angeles police reinvestigated the crime in the 70s, but again concluded Sirhan acted alone. Schrade appeared at Sirhan's 2021 parole hearing and said Sirhan was not the shooter of my friend Robert Kennedy. The parole board voted to free Sirhan, but the governor decided to leave him in prison. Schrade died of natural causes at age 97. Jill Nato, Fox News.
The federal grand jury has indicted David Dupop, the man already facing state charges for breaking into House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's home and assaulting her husband, Paul. The new federal charges include assault and kidnapping. Federal health officials are studying a now-closed California military base, once thought to be among the country's prettiest, to determine whether soldiers stationed there may have been exposed to poisons.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has sent a letter to California Congresswoman Katie Porter saying there's enough data and scientific reasons for its Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry to reevaluate health risks related to drinking water exposures at Fort Ord. The decision coming 9 months after an Associated Press investigation found drinking water on the base contained toxic chemicals, and hundreds of veterans who lived at the base on the Central California coast in the 1980s and 90s later developed rare and terminal blood cancers. Porter had asked for a new study in February, 2 days after the AP published its story. Lisa Lacera, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Half a day. This is Claire Manglona from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Okay, here we are back on Tall Tales after another big halftime show here, aptly conducted by our friend Jose, who also ran the Rogues Gallery during the halftime show. Jose, once again, instruct our international radio listening audience how each of them can be part of the Rogues Gallery.
Absolutely. If you go to thepoint.gu, that's the official website of this radio station, you'll find a link to the T-shirt. Find the T-shirt, find the link, have it delivered to your house, put the T-shirt on, take a selfie, or have someone take a picture of you, and send it to the Point's WhatsApp at 797-8255, and we'll add you to the Rogues Gallery.
Can you put that WhatsApp number and the
That's on Facebook, and I'm going to try to put it on YouTube as well.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, it looks like I got an incoming here, Jose. You haven't identified him. Hang on just a second here. I'm going to go into Esteves versus Brennan. This is another Civil Service Commission kerfuffle, but I want to give this caller a chance to get on the air first if he so desires. But I can't wait a whole lot longer. We got a caller, Jose? His name is Charles. And he wants to talk about ancestral land trust. All right, well, I'm pretty well able to discuss that. Tell me what you want to tell me, Charles.
All right, okay. I really don't have any ill feelings or anything like to our neighbors like the Kushrayans and the Chukis. The problem I have here is that there's a lot of us who have been waiting on a list for over 20 years to get our land, way before these people even came into the picture. And it seems like they're already making a decision to give the Kushrayans and the Chukis land when there's a lot of us out here who have been on a list to get our land. And there's some of us out here also who, by law, are designated to the land that we squatted on, which can't be taken away from us because we squatted on it before 1995. And so the only thing holding people like me up is that I'm on a waiting list. And no matter what happens, that piece of land that I'm waiting for can't be given to anybody else. But I can't do anything until my name comes up. Now, I don't understand why the Chukis or the Crossrians will be already, their paperwork's already going to be done, where people like me, we can't even do any paperwork until our name comes up. And so I'm thinking that, you know, if they are going to get that land for their cultural whatever, it's fine. But before they do, they should address all those people who've been on the list for 20 years already. So that's my main concern.
All right. Well, let me take this apart here and go at it one question at a time now. What is the source of your information that Chamorro Land Trust land is going to be given to people from Kosrae or Truck?
I just saw a commercial, and it was just on the news with the legislature. I just got part of it, and it's Chamorro Land Trust land, and it's being given to others where there's people who've been waiting for over 20 years.
Yeah, I got the 20 years part, but I am completely unaware of any initiative to give Chamorro Land Trust land to anybody.
I just saw it right about maybe 15 minutes ago on the news.
Which news?
It's you know how they have these little commercials in between, you know, stuff that you're watching before you watch it. Sometimes, like during the campaign, you'll see a campaign with the governor and stuff like that, and then it go back to whatever it is you're watching. Well, it was something like that, and these people were in front of, I believe, the legislature, and we saw this could be in the States for all I know. It was so quick, but it's happening. That it's in Derrido, the land. Some of it has been given already to the Filipinos, to the Palauans, and someone else. It's already done, and so it was on the news just 15 minutes ago. It was one of those little, what do you call it, advertisements or whatever, and it actually showed two Chamorro women giving their opinions as to whether or not this should happen.
Well, I'm going to reserve judgment on this until I have information. But right. I will move on to some of the other things that you said, Charles, okay?
All right.
First of all, the list that you've been on for 20 years.
Right.
You know that the government caved in on the Chamorro Land Trust list, and basically, in order to be eligible for Chamorro Land Trust land, it now is more complicated than just being able to prove up Chamorro ancestry. So the whole list is a nullity, because the settlement that the government entered into says that eligibility will be for people who had real property that was taken by eminent domain by the United States, or people who farmed real property that was taken by eminent domain by the United States.
Are you talking about ancestral right now?
No, I'm talking about Chamorro Land Trust. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about Chamorro Land Trust, and it's remember when Angel Santis and those guys down there?
I'm completely, and I've talked about it ad nauseum here on the show, including when the Department of Justice brought suit against the government of Guam.
Right.
The government of Guam hired Mike Phillips to come in and handle a litigation. They entered into a settlement, and the settlement was that there will be no more ancestral dimension to the Chamorro Land Trust. In order to be eligible for Chamorro Land Trust land, as I mentioned, you have to be able to prove up that you lived on land that was taken by the U.S. by eminent domain, not that you're Chamorro and that you signed up 20 years ago.
And you're saying that I had to have been farming on that land, and it was my land?
No, either you were farming on it, or it was your land and it was taken by the U.S. government.
All right, so this land that I'm applying for, it was taken by the U.S. government, and it was handed over to the land trust, and I was farming on it.
Okay, but when were you farming on it?
Well, what was I farming?
When?
Yes, I was farming everything. From bananas, watermelon, eggplants.
When?
Oh, when? This was since 1980s.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't do it for you.
So I would be dead already then in order to qualify.
Or your ancestors. You or your ancestors. That's the new rules. Well, not so new rules. Probably rules that are about 3 years old.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, okay, I'll check into it, but all my ancestors are dead, so I don't see how that... You understand what I'm saying? That's quite a long time ago if it's before the 80s. You would have to be talking about maybe in the 30s or the 40s when the U.S.
after 1950. It's been written up. Charles, it's been written up quite often in the papers. It's out there.
Okay, I'll check into it then.
All right.
Well, thank you anyway for hearing me.
Okay, good talking to you, Charles.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hold on.
What he's referring to is it's something that's discussed today, and I think you do need to read into more about it. It is a series of bills to lease public land to other communities other than Chamorro communities. So it's the one that Clint Rogel had pushed to have a, cultural centers built on land trust property.
On Chamorro land trust property.
Yes.
I see. Well,
I mean, that's just news today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where did you see that, Jose?
This is on KUAM.
All right. Well,
I'll send you the link.
I'll pick it up on Monday then. Charles, if you're listening on Monday, I'll give it a little bit more in-depth treatment on Monday. Okay, let's see. Where were we? Civil Service Commission, Esteves versus Brennan. Here's another cluster fumble at the Civil Service Commission. A dispute over the firing of an employee with the Guam Office of Homeland Security and Civil Defense over an alleged breach of GovGuam's internal computer network and improper storage of sensitive information is scheduled for a motion hearing on December 6. Longtime civil defense planner Leo Espia was terminated in April by Homeland Security Advisor Samantha Brennan over the accusations. Espia appealed the case to the Civil Service Commission, asserting wrongful termination. Civil Defense Director, who was on military leave at the time of the firing, has sided with the employee. A status conference was held Wednesday. The Civil Service Commission will have to decide on several requests made by counsel on both sides of the dispute. Assistant Attorney General Donna Lawrence, who represents Homeland Security and Civil Defense, along with the Office of the Governor, has asked for an investigation to be launched and the Civil Service Commission staff for what she was argued was improper conduct with Civil Defense Director Esteves. The staff, the faceless bureaucrats in the back room. She also wants Esteves ejected from the case entirely and to have a settlement agreement he has signed allowing Espia to be reinstated with back pay rejected. The director was off island on military orders for 2 years prior to June 22, the PDN reported, and was ordered by the Office of Governor to report to Brennan. He's back on Guam, but on leave from military orders up to a year again. Brennan has also motioned that Civil Service Commission Chair Juan Calvo recuse himself from the case, as his son is the governor's chief of staff, John Jr. Calvo, now a witness in the case. Guam Federation of Teachers Field Representative Robert Koss, Espia's legal counsel, be barred from the case. Koss has asked the case to be dropped entirely. The GFT representative argues the case is dead, with Espia already having reached a settlement with his former employer. So either Brennan or Estevez had the power to terminate. It's a little hard to see how Estevez had any power to terminate when he's on military leave. Well, I'll keep an eye on this, but it seems kind of like par for the course for the Civil Service Commission. All right, I got somebody here in the green room trying to get in. It's another Joe who wants to talk about the Hyde Amendment and the Helms Act. Why do you want to talk about the Hyde Amendment and the Helms Act, another Joe?
Yes, so the context was that you're talking about, like, for example, Senator Sanaga saying the exceptions, right, the rape or incest.
Yeah.
And I think that sounds like the same language used for the Hyde Amendment and the Helms Act. The Hyde Amendment stops federal funds for abortion in U.S. politics, and the Helms Act stops funding for abortions, foreign assistance, and where they're coercing people to have abortions. So those are the two. That's similar language. The exceptions will be in cases of.
So the Hyde Amendment has that rape or incest exception. Another Joe. And was it the life? It threatens the life of the mother. All right. Well, that's valuable information. Thank you for contributing that, another Joe.
Thanks for listening now.
All right. Okay, next I've got something from a really good website called the Mises Institute. Ludwig von Mises was the founder of the Austrian School of Economics, and he kind of gets into political science also. And I picked this up because you've heard me rant on the show how people use the word democracy for their own ends, most of the time in a way that has nothing to do with the meaning of the word democracy. Democracy, two Greek words, demo, people, cracy, government, government by the people. So yesterday I mentioned, that the lefties, the pro-aborts, criticized the Supreme Court in the Dobbs decision. They said, the Dobbs decision is a threat to democracy. And instead of a woman having a right to her own bodily autonomy, that now becomes a matter for state legislatures to decide. It's a threat to democracy. When, of course, it's exactly the opposite. So here's an article in Mises Institute titled Anti-Democratic just means something the regime doesn't like. Democracy is the new, quote, revolutionary. In the old Marxist regimes, anything that displeased the regime was said to be contrary to the revolution. For example, in the Soviet Union, national leaders spoke regularly of how the nation was in the process of revolutionary transformation toward a future idealized communist society. Many years after the actual revolution and coup d'etat in Russia following the collapse of Tsarist rule, the word revolution had positive connotations and was considered a source of legitimacy in official ideology. Revolutionary became a synonym for, quote, things we like. And it's no surprise that the 1952 Soviet legal manual counter-revolutionary activities as among the political crimes deemed generally dangerous crimes against the order of the state. Moreover, in the early 1950s, when Mao Zedong launched new efforts to consolidate communist power, he called the effort a campaign to suppress counter-revolutionaries. Other regimes adopted similar practices as well. Fidel Castro's regime frequently launched investigations and campaigns against anti-revolutionary dissidents, and Ethiopia's Marxist governments in the 1970s described domestic opponents as guilty of anti-revolutionary crimes. I think you get the drift here. Anything that was deemed counter-revolutionary or anti-revolutionary was assumed to be an awful thing that was a threat to be a reliably vague notion of progress towards the fulfillment of the alleged revolution. The vagueness of the term was, of course, an advantage from the point of view of the regime. Consequently, to be counter-revolutionary required nothing more than to be guilty of thought crime by subscribing to heterodox views on the current ruling party. Thus, to be a counter-revolutionary was simply to be opposed to the regime, regardless of one's actual ideological views. This is why communist Emma Goldman could be denounced for expressing doubts about the virtues of the Soviet regime. One's support for actual revolution was irrelevant, and anti-revolutionary could simply be defined or redefined as whatever the regime found objectionable at any given time. Now, that's the foundation. That was then, this is now. In the year 2022, we find the word democracy serving a similar role in political discourse. President Joe Biden has delivered two major speeches this year on how, quote, democracy will be supposedly abolished if his opponents win. Same thing. Last week, former President Barack Obama solemnly intoned that if Republicans win in Arizona, democracy as we know it may not survive. Indeed, this has become something of a mantra among left-wing politicians and their media allies.
This is supposed to be the smartest guy of the bunch.
Yeah.
Barack Obama.
Right.
And he's just a gaslighter.
Exactly. So whenever you hear this, it's going to be the end of our democracy, or Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, you know exactly where it came from. It's just a Marxist rhetorical device. And of course, as the article points out, the nice thing about it is the ambiguous nature of it. Because if you don't like it, it's obviously it's anti-democratic, right? This thing about you have to have a majority of the members of the House of Representatives vote in favor of something in order for it to pass. That's anti-democratic. All right. We're going to go a little bit to international for a while here. Klaus Schwab. And Klaus Schwab versus the West. This is the Great Reset, the Davos gang, the World Economic Forum. Let's head for Chicago, and then we'll come back to Davos, Switzerland.
Kona Brewing Company, Wenti Vineyards, and First Hawaiian Bank presents internationally renowned slack key master, Ledward Ka'apana. Ledward Ka'apana, founding member of the legendary Hawaiian music group Hui Ohana, joined Grammy-nominated and multiple Nahoku Hanohano Award winner Ledward Ka'apana for 2 magical nights.
Saturday, November 12th, the Tsubaki Tower, doors open at 6 p.m. And Sunday, November 13th, the Hotel Nico Guam, doors open at 5 p.m. Tickets are available at Ambrose and at the door. $40 in advance and $50 at the door.
Slack Key Master Ledward Ka'apana, live on Guam, Saturday, November 12th and Sunday, November 13th.
Presented by Kona Brewing Company, Wenti Vineyards, and First Hawaiian Bank. Special thanks to Choice Broadcasting, The Point, Star 101, and Boss 104.
All right, so Klaus Schwab. And the title here is Trans-Communism is Coming. And the subtitle is Never Let a Good Crisis Go to Waste. Winston Churchill made this statement towards the end of World War II when he sat in Yalta with U.S. President Roosevelt and Soviet leader Joseph Stalin to divide the Allies' spheres of influence. It also led, and Churchill referred to this with his Never Let a Good Crisis Go to Waste statement, to the creation of the United Nations. As with many of Churchill's other quotes, that statement took on a life of its own long after the man's passing. Remember Rahm Emanuel? Never let a good crisis go to waste. But there are some things he said against the final outcome. The Yalta meeting eventually resulted in mistrust, the Cold War, the arms race, the Iron Curtain, and the Berlin Wall, and everything that came after. Even the United Nations, apart from being an internationally very interesting New York talking shop for privileged people, and that's about all it is, turns out to be a mostly impotent mastodon where the original goal of never again war and hunger is still a cynical illusion after 77 years. Today, we see Never Let a Good Crisis Go to Waste reappearing in all kinds of bizarre initiatives. The best known statement of this is, of course, that of World Economic Forum leader Klaus Schwab, who saw the COVID crisis and the reactions to it not death, economic misery, and an attack on fundamental human rights, but rather, as he stated, a narrow window of opportunity to roll out the scenarios that have been ready since a few years ago and about which the man has been very frank. Now the mainstream press is always a bit gun-shy about the World Economic Forum and very much underestimates the influence of the little club has on government leaders and policy. And the Pope, Jose. Yeah, the Pope is very thick with Klaus Schwab in the World Economic Forum. Anyone who comments on this is quickly dismissed as a conspiracy thinker. It's nothing more than an informal meeting of world leaders, influencers, NGOs, and captains of industry, the specialized financial press said as recently as this spring. That now appears to be slightly different. In Canada, the World Economic Forum is suddenly helping the Canadian government set up the Federal Digital ID program. The aim of the new initiative is to develop a digital ID that can be used in various systems and environments, from government departments to airports and border controls. This known Traveler Digital ID was a pilot project of the WEF in 2018. Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada is a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. The other partner in Canada's KTDI program, by the way, is the Dutch government. This includes Sigrid Kaag, an adjunct contributor to the World Economic Forum. Kaag is pretty much the Netherlands' shadow prime minister and finance minister. She reported a few days ago that she wants to oblige banks to put all transactions above 100 euros into a large database under the guise of fighting fiscal fraud. People are talking about the same thing in our country. That in itself is a huge breach of privacy law. The Dutch government's plan to track almost transactions of its citizens could also be a preparatory step towards the implementation of digital central bank currency. The digital euro is again not a fairy tale of conspiracy thinkers, but was also previously announced by the European Central Bank. Such a digital euro centrally controlled by the ECB is the prelude to total social control of society on the Chinese model. With it, every financial transaction can not only be monitored, but then adjusted or even banned. Linked to credit or debit cards, your spending patterns can accurately be tracked. Linked to your COVID Safe card or app, which will soon be renamed as a health certificate, your money can be blocked in case of undesirable behavior. Bought too much or avocados from Africa this morning, causing your corporate footprint to go into the red? Then your digital money for these products will be blocked. Put too many bottles of Moet et Chandon champagne in your shopping basket while your digital health certificates show you have high blood pressure? Better not drink any more alcohol this month anyway. Your digital money will say to you. Anyone who already takes a plane once in a while will not be able to book their next flight if, as a result, your CO2 plane points have been exceeded. You see where this is going? Maybe the green tick on your digital pass will suddenly jump to red. And if you protest about it and want to hit the streets, the red tick might be a free pass to riot police to beat you up. Excessive? It already happened consistently last year at peaceful demonstrations in the Netherlands, Canada, Belgium, and France, and it's already happening in China. This is from Klaus. You will own nothing, and you will be happy, he once told us in a video at the World Economic Forum. The first part of that slogan is getting close. Allow me to have my doubts about the second part. Trans-communism is knocking at the door. Better not open it up. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about something that's happening in the United States that's not as sinister yet. On Monday, I went down to RevTax. My driver's license is expiring. I went down to RevTax to renew, and I thought I would get a real ID since they're giving them away, right? So in order to get a real ID has a star on the front of it, and a real ID will get you into federal buildings, on airplanes, all kinds of places. There's a deadline coming up. I think it's April of next year, so that if you don't have a real ID, you won't be able to do these things like going to federal buildings and going to airports, etc. They pushed the deadline back a couple of times, once because of COVID. So in order to get a real ID, you've got to have something like a passport, something to prove citizenship or permanent residence, a utility bill, the actual paper Social Security card that you were issued once upon a time, and a couple of other things. And you bring these to RevTax, and it's about a 20-minute process by the time they scan all these things in and make these different entries, take your picture, and give you this real ID with a star on it. Well, because they're giving away, I wanted one. And I do go to federal buildings, and I do go to airplanes and things. I don't want to lug my passport all around with me. But I don't like this idea of what amounts to a national ID card, because I can see us heading down the same track. The next thing will be the real ID, but with a barcode on it, so that it can be scanned and data kept track of, just like this article here about trans-communism. The more the government can keep track of you, the less freedom you're going to have. Well, if you're not going to do anything wrong, you don't have anything to be afraid of, right? Wrong. So if you don't know who Klaus Schwab is, if you go to Michael Matt on YouTube, The Remnant on YouTube, you'll find out a lot about it. A lot of the national magazines have been covering Davos and the Great Reset and the World Economic Forum, a very sinister group, one that requires a certain amount of vigilance. Okay, getting close to the end of the show here. R. Keith wants to ask about a real ID. Go ahead, R. Keith.
Hi, Bob. You know, since it's the left that seems to be pushing this idea, will this ID be racist too?
Depends on racism is like democracy. If it's something you like, it's democratic. If something you don't like, it's anti-democratic.
Ah, that's right. Situational ethics, I forgot.
And if it's something you don't like or someone you don't like, oh, it's racist, right? So how do you mean? Go ahead.
So will you be able to have any of the 87 genders on your ID?
No, it's limited to male and female, but I suspect that'll be fixed later on.
Wow.
But it doesn't have a category for race. And once upon a time, ID cards did have that. Remember? It has your picture, so the person looking at the card can draw his own conclusions.
Anyway. Okay, I was just curious. You know, it really is funny how the double think, the cognitive dissonance displayed by the left on just about every single subject. You know, requiring an ID to vote is racist, but this is perfectly acceptable.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you don't have the right ID card, you aren't going to be able to, if you're in Washington, you're not going to be able to go into, say, the Department of Interior unless you show that ID card.
Wow. Okay, just curious.
Good talking to you, R. Keith.
It's that one word that keeps coming up on almost all these issues, and that's called relativism. Everything's relative. But you know what? If we're going to be able to have 37 plus gender identifications, maybe they should rethink calling it a real ID.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a good point. And it used to be, you know, I had an interesting experience back in the 90s. I was on a trip to the States, and I was in a place called International Falls, Minnesota. It's on the Canadian border. And there's a town across the border called Fort Frances, Ontario. And I'm a border crossing buff. I just love to do that. You know, I've been to probably 90% of the Mexican border towns and a lot of the Canadian border towns. And anytime I get a chance, I try to do it. So I drove, and I had my passport with me, of course, because I came from Guam, went through Japan. So I crossed over into Fort Frances, and then when I came back into the United States, a U.S. immigration officer was standing there. I had my passport, and I showed him my passport. He took a look at it, and he said, don't you have a driver's license?
And more authority.
Yeah, he wanted the superior form of identification.
I always found it easier to leave the States than to come back in. And I remember we were upstate New York going to Canada on the way back, and this is when I was a kid, teenager, and my family's in this car. My dad, of course, is military, and he has his military ID. We all have our dependent military IDs, but they still questioned, all your children were born here? Are you sure? Did you? And I was trying to figure out where he thought my dad was smuggling us from. But it is interesting how our IDs are very consequential.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, so much for Klaus Schwab. Let's see, where was I going to go next here? I think we'll go to Churchill Downs.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglania from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
Reggae in Paradise. Let's vibe out to some of the hottest Irie vibes on all your playlists. Join the vibes on November 19th at Paseo Stadium. It's on a Saturday and we have an amazing lineup of artists. Mix Plate, Bubba B, Fantasia, The John Dank Show,
Still running away.
Kimmy A. Minor, Lickle Jordy, High Water, and Rebel Sojas. Get your tickets now at guamtime.net. What are you waiting for? Presenting sponsors, big thanks to Riga Royal, IT&E, White Claw, GVB, Gasolina, Linda's Diner, and Empire Media and Entertainment. Saturday, November 19th, Reggae in Paradise. We'll see you there.
So here we are at Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky, and Johnny Utah caught a fast plane from Salt Lake City all the way down to Louisville so he could chat with me here in the grandstand at Churchill Downs. So, Johnny, you wanted to tell me about another word in the leftists' lexicon. Go ahead.
Stochastic. Have you heard them use that word lately?
No, I haven't.
I've heard it quite a bit on the news here in the mainland. Yeah, they've been using the word stochastic quite a bit.
Something like, that toast of tall tales is really sarcastic? No, that's sarcastic.
No, stochastic.
Johnny, excuse me, I'm just being sarcastic about stochastic.
Oh, are you being sarcastic? I'm sorry, I didn't catch your humor. Go ahead, I apologize.
I'm done being sarcastic. Let's be sarcastic. Go ahead.
So they're using the word stochastic. The reason it stuck out in my mind when I heard it and it caught my attention, because I think I've been hearing them use this word now for at least a month. I think it's been about a month ago the first time they caught my attention, is because it's used with radiation. It's a common word in the effects of radiation in language and literature that you read about radiation, and I work with radiation, so I'm real familiar with that word. And when I heard it being used in political science on the TV, and it was from a leftist TV organization, I was just like, are they really using that word in that way? And they are, and they have been. So, but so they're using the word stochastic as in it sounds real intelligent and complicated and convoluted, and it really just means random. It means something that randomly happens, and they'll say well, we have a stochastic effect here of democracy and blah blah blah, and it's like the common layman people have no idea what these guys are even talking about.
Well, that may be the object, right, Johnny Utah?
That's totally the object. The Marxist objectivity is to confuse.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for bringing that to our attention, Johnny.
Yes, sir. You guys, how'd everything go there with the elections? Are you okay?
No, we're not okay. Our governor lost. Our attorney general is 77 votes ahead, with more votes to be counted. Our Republican in the legislature did not do well at all. So no, we're not dancing in the streets over here, Johnny.
Well, Utah did really well. We went Republican all the way in every category. There's not I don't think a single Democrat won, even on the local level, even here in Salt Lake City, which is considered to be a purple area. Mike Lee, our senator, won by a landslide. So we nobody's talking about it, but we were no different than Florida.
That's great. That's probably a tribute to your advocacy, Johnny Utah.
I would. Excuse me. Yeah, well, I appreciate that, your enthusiasm for me. I thank you. But Doug Moylan won, though, right? Is that not over with yet?
77 votes ahead of Levin Camacho. They still have to count the absentee ballots. So I complimented Pete Santos today that his showing off really paid off because he got about 2,500 votes. So his showing off really helped him out. It probably would have been a huge margin for Doug Moylan because I think Santos took votes away from Doug Moylan.
I told Pete that from the get-go when he first I think you were off island, but when he first started beating the drum saying he was going to run, I said, you're nothing more than a operative for the Democratic Party, for the left. You're going to take votes away from him, and he went on this whole spill about how he's going to change things and how much he knows so much more than Doug Moylan, and he knows so much more than Levin Camacho. And like, if you really care about the people of Guam and you are there for the people of Guam, and as you say you are, then you're going to be a team player, and being a team player means getting the best person to do the job in place. And if you think that you are that best person, then you are thinking with your ego. You're thinking, with your, you're not thinking about the people of Guam. You're thinking about yourself and your own ego. And I said that. I said, you're hurting the island. You're hurting the people. But he didn't listen.
Yeah, well, he did what he did, so he's the one that's going to have to live with it.
So, well, yeah. I'm praying for you, and I'm praying for the people of Guam, and I hope to God that everything works out with the conflict that's occurring over there with China and North Korea, and that all stuff gets taken care of and handled properly and not escalated, because I know that it's getting serious over there.
Okay, Johnny Utah, good talking to you as usual.
Yes, sir. You have a God bless day.
Thank you.
I just found the use of stochastic in kind of what Biden has been doing in his speeches and what Obama did, where they say that there's going to be an attack somewhere. We know it for sure, but we don't know when or where. Like, they call it stochastic terrorism. So we know it's going to happen, but we just don't know where, and we already know the type of people it's going to be. And of course, they always refer to that very small type of community, the MAGA Republicans. And so it is being used in a way to, again, gaslighting the rest of the public.
To dress up your gaslighting, right?
Absolutely.
I come back again to the sesquipedal word. No sense using a two-syllable word when a sesquipedal word is available. And for those tailgaters that have forgot what a sesquipedal word is, here it is. Pedal, P-E-D-A-L, feet, right? Sesqui, 1.5. A sesquicentennial is 150 years, right? Sesquipedal. A sesquipedal word is a word that is 1.5 foot long. Sesquipedal being an example of itself, right? So there's no sense using a simple word like unknown if you could use stochastic. Okay, let's go back to Real ID for a minute here. Sandra wants to know why do they still issue not real IDs? And then Michael LaGuatnia says it's, let's see. If I'm not mistaken, a real ID is a federal requirement. Well, it depends on what you mean by federal requirement. As I mentioned, after the cutoff date, it will be a federal requirement to transact certain kinds of business, like going into certain federal buildings, getting on airplanes, going to airports, etc. So that's the national government's angle on it. And the national government said, here is a way that you can perfect your eligibility to go into these places. we are going to prescribe a standard that states may, if they want to, comply with. And if they comply with those standards, then they will be able to call the paper or the identification they produce a real ID card. And the mark of a real ID card is it has a star in the upper right-hand corner. So states don't have to do it, only if they want to. But if they want to, then they have to apply to the standards that the national government puts in place.
Let me guess, there was incentives given to states if they chose to do a real ID.
I suspect so, yeah, the
That's how they do
usual
it.
bribe, yeah. And then Mike LaGuardia says it's the same price, so why wouldn't everyone want to get a real ID? And the answer is, once upon a time, if you didn't have to spend a lot of time in line up at RevTax, 15 minutes, you'd be in there and out of there. For the real ID, you're probably going to be spending an hour. Yeah, it's a very time-consuming process.
Plus, you have to gather a lot of other information.
Plus, you got to
Mayor's
have
verification. Right?
Well, a mayor's verification or a current utility bill, something like a passport, a birth certificate that meets certain requirements, that paper social security card, and so on. So it's a little bit arduous. I didn't get one 5 years ago. I think they had just begun to issue them. I just barely, I was up there like on the 18th of December when my birthday was the 20th. I just didn't feel like horsing around with it. This time I got plenty of time, so I thought, well, if they're giving them away, I'll do it. And of course, if you're a veteran, wonder of wonders, there's no charge for renewal of your driver's license. So I suspect a lot of folks are going to go out today. It's too bad. I hope the Marine Corps recruiting office is open because a lot of folks are probably going to want to go out and join the Marine Corps to get that free driver's license, right? Okay, we got just a few more minutes to go here before the end of the show. I have an article here that I'm going to have to, it's an important article, and I pushed it out because of the election. It's an editorial by Troy. I probably ought to put it in Jemmy Cotney on Monday. And the editorial says, it's time the feds took a look at the GMH contract. We've talked a lot about the contract. Ken has done a lot of spade work on the contract. Troy's gotten in there. Pacific Island Times has begun to cover it. And it is a really serious matter. And it could have been the October surprise. But you know which one of our political operatives grabbed a hold of it and made an issue of it? Only Ken.
Silence.
Only
that's
Ken.
right.
Yeah, nobody else. And it was and is still a dynamite issue, which you'll see as soon as I get around to reading Troy's editorial here, and about the perhaps the FBI can get involved, et cetera. It just doesn't look good at all.
There's another gumshoe detective on this, and that's former candidate Harvey Egna.
Harvey Egna, yeah. And it's too bad Harvey didn't make it. I think Harvey would have brought something to that body, you know.
He knows a little bit about this stuff.
He does, yeah. Which would make him stand out. Somebody who knows a little bit about something would stand out in that body.
At the least.
Yeah. Are we almost there, Jose? All right, let me say goodbye to our president then. Okay. Let's go, Brendan.
is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Skirting the coastline, I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Hurricane Nicole turning to the north, running along Florida's southeast coast, still short of making landfall.
This storm is the last thing these Floridians need, causing a lot of problems, especially when it comes to erosions. So many areas in Florida, in fact, 2/3 of all counties in Florida are under an emergency declaration at this hour.
Fox's Lauren Blanchard in Cocoa Beach, Florida. Wind gusts have been reported at 86 miles an hour at the Kennedy Space Center, where the Artemis moon rocket sits on the launch pad ahead of next Tuesday's scheduled launch. 57,000 power outages are already reported in Florida. Hurricane Ian struck the southwest Florida coast 6 weeks ago. President Biden says there was a sigh of relief at the White House watching Tuesday's election returns.
Based on what we know as of today, we've lost very few seats for certain. We still have a possibility of keeping the House, but it's going to be close.
Democrats would have to win 34 of the 44 still undecided House districts to maintain their majority. Republicans need to win 11 of them to take control. The president says he isn't planning on making any fundamental changes in the second half of his first term, but will meet with congressional leaders from both parties once the final results are known. Georgia is preparing for another U.S. Senate election.
The ballots here in Georgia are already being built, and every single county in the state is getting ready for a December 6th rematch. Georgia Secretary of State made the call official, saying there are just under 10,000 outstanding ballots. Half of those are provisional, and the math for them equals a runoff.
Fox's Aisha Hosni also still undecided the Senate races in Arizona and in Nevada. America is listening to Fox News.
Connect to Fox News Audio on the Fox News app. Listen to hear your favorite hosts like Brian Kilmeade, Jimmy Fallon, and Guy Benson standing up for what's right, live and via podcast.